Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So, this is a question and answer session that we're running as part of Class Central's free web development bootcamp. If you haven't signed up, don't worry about it. There's absolutely no requirement to sign up to the bootcamp to enjoy this session. And now I'm going to be really excited to introduce you to the stars of the show. So, we've got three guests with us today who are going to be sort of telling us about their background, telling us what they did in their boot camps and what they've learned and really what their experiences were after the fact. Please, if you've got any questions, go ahead and throw them in the other way. Throw them either in the Twitch or the YouTube little chatty box and be lovely, be polite the way you are. Oh, hello, the way y'all always are. Let's welcome Annie first. And Annie, if you could introduce yourself, that would be so exciting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Annie, and I am from Juno College, which is a front-end bootcamp in Toronto. I graduated in summer of 2019, and I'm currently in my second job, which is as a I recently got a promotion, so I'm the front-end engineering lead at a SaaS startup in Toronto. My first job was at a WordPress VIP agency, also in Toronto. And so I was there for about a year and a quarter before I moved to the startup. So that's where I am now.
Very exciting. Taylor, hey, can you chat to us a little bit about your background and what you've been doing?
Yep. So I went to Full Stack Academy that's located in New York City. I graduated in December of 2019. I'm still in my first job right now where I'm working as a front-end engineer for advertising technology. And my previous background was in menswear design.
Oh, wow. So from fashion and design on that sense to designing for the web, how robustly exciting. While I'm being excited, let's welcome Caroline as well.
Hello, I'm Caroline. I graduated in June of 2017 from a bootcamp called Co-Clan in Edinburgh in the UK. And since then, I worked for the Scottish Government afterwards for about a year. And now I'm in Manchester in the UK as well, where I work for a company called the Co-op, which is like a large cooperative that has retail businesses and funerals and all sorts of things. So it's a weird business, but yeah, and I've been a full stack developer at both of those jobs.
Sorry, did you say they do both groceries and funerals?
Yes, that's correct. And
cool.
A couple of other things. But those are the big, grocery convenience stores and funeral homes.
Cool. You know. I just wanted to make sure that I had parsed that correctly.
Yep, you did.
And we're going to be running this as a question and answer session. So if you're watching along live, please do feel free to ask any polite and respectful questions you'd like. But because I'm on stage with y'all and I'm very, very mean and very nosy, would it be appropriate to ask what sort of the pricing around these different boot camps looked like back when you attended? It's very bright. Oh, what did it cost right out of the bat? It's just as bold as I can get. Do forgive me.
Yeah, I'll go first. So at the time, Co-Clans, this was 4 years ago, it cost £4,500, which was for 16 weeks of full-time class, which was compared to, it was one of the reasons I went to it. It seemed like a real value for money, but it was partly because they had a lot of funding from the Scottish Government at the time to help like boost their digital skills in the industry sector.
Okay, for me? Okay, I'll go next. Mine.
I wasn't sure who should go.
Yeah, Jess, you might want to just ask us.
Oh gosh, of course. I forgot that you all are just being
polite.
Impossibly polite, where I was just like, surely everyone be lunging to talk about money.
I believe at the time when I did my bootcamp, it was about 12,500 Canadian dollars. So I don't know what that translates to in American dollars, but it was a 13-week bootcamp. I think I know I'm just like bad with numbers and stuff, but I believe it was 13 weeks for 12,500. And if you had done the like the part-time course beforehand, you would get a $2,000 scholarship discount that goes towards that, which I did as well. So for me, it was about 10,500 Canadian.
Okay. And Carolyn, to come back, how long was your course?
Oh yeah, it was 16 weeks.
Oh gosh, yeah. You're the last one left. Yeah, Taylor, you want to talk money and time?
Yeah, I think I blew all of you guys out of the water. So mine was 20 grand USD. And there was, I think, like a $2,000 scholarship for women, but it didn't really make much of a difference at that point.
Right. $20,000.
Yeah.
How long did that? What did you say the time commitment was on that again?
Oh, this was a 4-month boot camp, so about 16 weeks. Yeah.
Wow. I don't think I've ever bought any. Like, I don't think any of my cars have ever done this.
Yeah.
We've got Giuseppe asking a really interesting question that I'm going to go ahead and throw up on screen and saying, "Hey, what made you decide to go to a boot camp? So, did you try out things like self-learning or online resources before you decided to commit to a boot camp, or was it just what was that process like?" Don't make me call in the class.
I can start with this one. So for me, yeah. So for me, I started teaching myself, but I had a full-time job and my job at the time, thankfully, had a personal leave of absence that I could take that was about the same exact time as the boot camp. And so for me, I just learned a lot better in a school setting, having other people who are also like, in the grind, struggling with me at the same time. So for me, that was just like, it was a lot of money, but it was the best scenario for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then for me, when I was deciding to make the switch, I was a designer before, and I was coming into Canada from like many years in Japan and coming to Toronto, trying to find a design job. I couldn't get a design job because after many years of teaching English, I guess my skills were not up to date anymore. So I was looking into UX bootcamps and coding bootcamps. And the reason I chose a coding bootcamp at after, like, in the end, was because I tried to study coding by myself and I already had a little bit of experience. But what I found online was that a lot of the material could be outdated. There was not a lot of guidance. I didn't have a community around me to do it. So I was working like 3 jobs, and I was trying to basically study by myself. I didn't know anybody else who was a developer, so I didn't have any guidance. And also, maybe it's just like my personality, but I found that I was jumping between like different courses and different programs and everything because there wasn't any structure in place. And it was very difficult for myself to create my own curriculum where I could like self-study and get through all the things that I needed to do. So with the bootcamp, very, very similar to Taylor, what I had was, they had a structure in place. I worked very, very well with deadlines in place as well to do projects and everything. I'm really bad at like making my own deadlines, but I'm very good at like making other people's deadlines as well. So that was really good. And there was structure to learn like Git. We had like stand-ups. We had a lot of support. And the one main reason as well was that I really, really wanted the help at the end of the bootcamp to get a job. Like that was my number one reason going in. I was like, I'm going to go and do this bootcamp. I'm going to work my ass off. And at the end of it, I'm going to get a job and that was like the number one thing. And the bootcamp had a lot of connections with local companies around Toronto and connections and stuff. So yeah, that was a really big factor in the decision to go to bootcamp as well.
So for me, I think I had, like Annie says, I relate to the sort of jumping around different courses. I definitely tried to learn a lot on my own, and I'd done some, but I'd always sort of get so far and then get a bit stuck. And I would ask for people for help, like, friends on Twitter, that kind of thing. But it's always very hard unless you're I would find it hard unless you're kind of talking to someone. And yeah, at the time I was working as a project manager at a place where we made websites. So I was like working with code a lot, and I was just like, I just want to get that bit further. It looks really good. And trying to study around a full-time job is, I'm sure we've all done it. It's really, really, really hard. And I find structure, being around people, like learning around people makes things so much easier. And same as I need, like, yeah, the network that was already there for job opportunities was really important to me.
Yeah.
So we've got a really good question here, and it's sort of a two-parter of someone saying, "Oh, hey, thank you for sharing your successes." And I love this question because y'all went in. Some of you just paid just a whole pile of money. You took the time, you learned the skills, and you got these fancy jobs. Oh gosh, it is genuinely exciting to hear about your successes. If it's not too terribly personal, did you at any point have any doubts? And really, how did you overcome those? If so, very personal, isn't it? It's me being a bully, trying to ask people. Oh, let's ask the most terribly personal things we can think of.
I definitely, I'll take this one first. Oh, do you want to go?
No, sorry, I was just.
I love the first question where people have collided was the doubts question. Everybody's like, oh, I'd like to bare my soul first.
Go on.
Okay, sure, thank you. I had a lot of imposter syndrome coming in, and I remember because one of the things that I think it's a mental thing as well, but my identity was an identity of a designer. So during bootcamp, one of the things that the instructors basically told us to do was you have to believe that you are a developer. Like right now, you don't write like developer to be, you are a developer. And because we were referring to ourselves as developers like during the duration of the bootcamp, it slowly helped us to be more comfortable with that name. But it was very, very difficult for sure. And I definitely had a lot of doubts. Even in my first job at the agency going in, I do remember in the first kind of 6 months, like 4 to 6 months period, like I would have these kind of weird out of body experiences where I would literally be doing the job. I'll be like coding and like, doing my Jira tickets and everything. But I would have this like kind of feeling that it wasn't me who was like, doing the job. It was like someone actually coding through me and like guiding me, and I was going to get found out as an imposter. Like it's not me doing the job. It's like somebody else like in some other place, and I'm just like doing it somehow. So that would probably be an extreme version of the imposter syndrome, but it does kind of show you that it did take me a while to get comfortable with it, and I definitely had doubts going in. But I would say that something that I heard as well that really helped me with this is that if you don't believe in yourself, have the faith that someone else believed in you. To get into my bootcamp, I had to go through like 3 interviews. They believed that I could do it. Even if I don't believe in myself, then at least have the faith that somebody else believed that I could do it and lean on their kind of faith.
I love this. So even in those brief moments where you don't believe in yourself, believe the people who do believe in you.
Yeah. That's it.
I'll go. So I think that is very relatable. The thing about it doesn't feel like you coding. Even now, every so often I'll say something in a meeting like, "Oh, we need to, add some more integration tests into this part," and be like, "Oh, that's really a thing a developer would say, isn't it? Look at you saying developer things." It's like it's been 4 years and I still do it. But I think having to what you said as well. I never feel like I'm good enough at my job. Like I never do. And I was thinking, oh, I've got to catch up on this. I've got to catch up on this. Oh, I don't know that thing. And I had a real epiphany the other day. I was like, maybe you are good enough. Like you have the job and you can always be better. Like you can always try and learn new things and be better. But just imagine for a bit that you are at least good enough. And that's really a lot for me. When I was at the boot camp, I think I had not doubts, but obviously doubts because you just don't know what's going to happen. It's a really big leap to take. But my very boring way that I dealt with them was I just worked really, really hard and showed up and read all the things they told me to. And I thought, if I'm not sure I can do this, I better make sure I give myself the best chance I possibly have to succeed at it. And that's going to be by doing all the homework, doing the extra homework. Sorry for
But you also
the boring
rested
answer.
a lot and took good care of yourself, didn't you?
Yes, that's in my notes as well. Yes.
It was just like, they're doing their boot camp now. Tell them to rest. Tell them to rest as well.
Oh yeah.
Literally in my notes it says get me more sleep than, like, number one advice for bootcamp, get more sleep than you think you need. So just don't worry, sorry, I won't neglect that.
No, because our first guest speaker was Dr. Barbara Oakley and with Zach Caceres, and they talked to us about the need to sleep to cement your learning, which was pretty cool. And always brilliant and exciting. Taylor, you never doubted yourself, not once, right?
So I actually didn't start feeling imposter syndrome. Oh, by the way, I hate that phrase because I feel like it's more of your environment that makes you feel like an imposter than you yourself. So I guess just for lack of better words, I actually didn't really feel that until I was in the job application process. When it came to be in a boot camp, to me, I was just saying, if everyone else can kind of do this, I really don't see why I can't. So throughout the actual boot camp, I felt very confident within myself. And then after the boot camp, when I was putting in, the work to kind of prepare myself for interviews, I felt very, very confident. I had done practice interviews and I had done really well in them as well. So it wasn't until like my second interview that I felt like I had just completely bombed it.
Oh.
And that's actually the job that I got. So I guess I did do too bad, but yeah, it wasn't until then when, they had asked me questions that I just had never encountered before. I wasn't really sure how to handle them. I had tried to like follow everything that everyone had taught me for interviews, and this was just like completely different from what everyone else had told me that I was supposed to do. And then when I got the job, I felt very similar in a way that I just couldn't believe that I actually had this job. And like I was coding and I was working, but I had that same out of body experience where it's just like I couldn't put two and two together that like I actually had this job, but I was doing the job. And then it was more when I realized that, I didn't have the same background as everyone else. Not a lot of people looked like me. So I think that kind of contributed to as well. But what's helping me now, and this is, almost a year and a half into my first job, is one, feeling like, if everyone else can do it, why can't I? Two, when you start working in this field, you realize that the whole internet is kind of put together by gum and shoestrings. So no one knows what they're doing. And then also three, I kind of feel like I cheated the system. I mean, there are people who paid way more than I did for computer science degrees. They've been doing it for years and years and years. And here we are at the same exact point. And like, I feel like I kind of skipped all of that and was able to get a job.
I love that. So talking about getting a job, and this is really, really, so just really quickly, because I think this is fair. We've got a really good question asking, how long did it take you to find a job upon graduating? But one thing I want to go ahead and touch on really fast is what sort of technologies, what sort of skills do you all work on? So the boot camp we're working on at the moment is just HTML, CSS, and accessibility and design. So these sort of core things. We're not even doing JavaScript yet. We're hoping to come back and do them in January. But what sort of technologies did you all work with in your boot camp to get you into those first jobs?
In my boot camp, we worked with, it was full stack. So from the front end, we worked with HTML, CSS, and then started transitioning into JavaScript and then working with the React framework. And then for any back-end work that we were doing, we were using Node and Express.
Oh, fab. Caroline, what about you? If I recall correctly, CodeClan just does a whole heck ton of different tech.
Yeah, so the way we did it was, I know a lot of places start with HTML and CSS, but CodeClan was different. We did Ruby for 4 weeks and learned sort of the fundamentals of like programming, kind of conditionals and loops and things you'll all run into later on in your journeys if you haven't already. And then from there, we sort of moved on to learning about the concepts of like object-oriented programming, which again, maybe you will work on that when you haven't. And then we did Java for a couple of weeks because lots of employers in the region who were in the Bootcamp network came and said, like, we can't hire people who only know Ruby. Please, can you teach them a bit about Java? So they amended the curriculum. And then after that, we moved on to doing more like sort of a full stack with a front end. So it was JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and using React as well to build front end. So yeah, from about the halfway point, we were able to build full stack apps.
Wow. Annie, what about you?
So Juno College, previously Hacker U, is a front end focused bootcamp. To get in, actually, you had to do build a responsive web page before you could get in. So you had to have some kind of knowledge going in already. But the curriculum was very, very focused on accessibility, HTML, CSS, SAS. We learned those really deeply for a while, and then jumped into programming and JavaScript, and ended with React. So it was 11, 13 weeks of very, very focused on the front end, and on accessibility, semantic, HTML, making sure that your CSS cascades correctly, and all of those things. So yeah, it definitely was lots of focus on just making the front end really accessible, performant, and so front end focus.
We've got a really, really good question. So now that we've got sort of an idea of the different technologies that you brought into your job hunt, how long did it take to find that first job? And did you find there were any challenges that felt unique to having a boot camp background versus a computer science one?
For me, it took me 6 months to find my job. I don't know if the challenges per se were difficult specifically for a bootcamp grad versus a CS grad. I did learn in the process that most CS grads kind of go through the internship route. So that was a little harder for me because, one, I wasn't interested in an internship, and then two, not having the school backing to, pursue an internship. My biggest challenges, I think, was because I did have my full-time job while I was trying to find a new job. So trying to learn and study, and the other people who were in my bootcamp cohort, a lot of them had left their jobs. So a lot of them had free times to make all of these wonderful applications, make, experiment with different technologies, applied to 50, 60 different jobs where I'd only put in one application so far. So for me, I found that the best route was to focus on what I brought as a developer. So for me, I don't consider myself to be the most the best coder, especially in comparison to some of the other people that were in my cohort. But from my background, I looked at my background and I saw that I worked with a lot of different teams, cross collaboration. So I had more skills in more soft skills and a background with connecting and working with other people. So I found that, if I kind of shifted my focus towards teams that work really closely with product managers or UX designers, a lot of cross collaboration, as opposed to teams where they were strictly back end or they did a little bit more isolated work, teams that were working in machine learning or heavily science based, I just knew that that's not where my skills fit in best. So, maximizing the little time that I had with just focusing on what I could bring as an engineer.
I can go next. So I had a job offer before I finished the bootcamp, which was really nice. I think it was in the last week. I didn't end up taking it in the end, and I got the job that I did take about a month later. But so in the UK, lots of companies, sort of large companies, have what they call graduate schemes, and so they're aimed at. It's not quite an internship, but it will be like an entry-ish level job aimed at people who say just graduated from university. And I applied to one of those, saying, well, I haven't graduated from university, but I'm doing this boot camp. And because it was a consultancy, they would have a bit of what they call a graduate intake. So they knew they'd take on a few juniors, give them some work to do, and kind of slowly roll them onto working with their clients. And so I found an organization that was, prepared to take on people who were fairly inexperienced as developers, but had some knowledge, had some aptitude, an interview there. So that was good. And then the place where I did end up working was somewhere, again, through the network of my bootcamp. So they were very ready to hire people with that background. So yeah, looking out for organizations that kind of understand who you are as someone coming from bootcamp was really valuable, and there's plenty of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think I mentioned before that one of the reasons I went into bootcamp was because of the, not promise, but the help to get you a job. So I did my bootcamp pre-pandemic, so it was in person. And one of the things that they had in the final week of our bootcamp was something called an industry day, where they invited local hiring partners and companies to come in. And we would basically almost do like a student employer kind of like speed dating thing, where we were all sitting around like on the tables with our laptops and then make a presentation and talk about our, like, I guess like our key project. And we had like 1 minute, and then the bell would go, and then the employer would like go around to the next student. So that was like something that happened pre-pandemic, and I actually got an offer from that 2 weeks after graduating. So I was very fortunate in that. And then in terms of coming from a bootcamp versus a CS degree, I think one thing that always comes up when kind of considering like should you get a bootcamp or a CS degree is that people say that with a CS degree is a lot more theoretical, whereas with a bootcamp, you're learning the skills that you actually do on the job. And honestly, in my first job, I definitely found that like everything that I had learned in my bootcamp was applicable to my first job at the agency. But I think something that did help me to get the first job was because of my background in design. I worked in like product companies and agencies prior to working as a developer. And at the agency that ultimately like hired me for my first job, it was a small agency, and they wanted someone who would be able to take care of the kind of like not to have to worry about like the design and everything as well. So that was an important factor. So yeah, definitely don't discount your background, because you can definitely pull a lot of things from your background into your new career as a developer or engineer.
And all of you in different ways have referenced the value of, oh, Annie, you saying, oh, I had a boot camp that had a lot of employer support, and with Caroline saying, oh, in the UK, all these graduate schemes. I don't want to be discouraging to folks who are taking our boot camp, but I'm so sorry at the scale we're running it. We really don't have employment support built in as part of this. So expect that it might be a little bit more challenging. We will be around on the forums and on streams to help you and cheer you along the way. But unfortunately, as you all are all over the world, it makes it a little bit challenging to be like, oh yeah, come talk to my buddy down the street who has an agency. We've got a really good question from Adrian. So we've got so Monica and Isabel and some other really great people asked some similar questions around like, hey, talk to us about job hunts. Hey, we've got one from Adrian saying, hey, you all are working with the web. You are making the web. Do you have any resources you liked around entry-level jobs in web development? Ooh.
Yeah, I can suggest something. I'm trying to think of the name of the book. So my approach for the job hunt, and I guess I can kind of connect this to your point where you're saying how at this time your boot camp doesn't have the career support, because even though my boot camp did have career support, they ultimately didn't help me land the job that I currently have. So I did a lot more like outside of the boot camp work for that. So also in conjunction with your question about resources, I did a lot of networking to try to see like what employers are looking for, what they're asking, what kinds of questions they're asking. And I kind of used that to kind of guide me to resources that I should be using to prepare for the job hunt. I remember one hiring manager had told me that one of the biggest problems that a lot of bootcamp grads in my area, they were all learning like fancy fun frameworks, but they didn't really know, when they asked for them to, build a component, how do you do that in just, plain JavaScript? And a lot of them struggled with that. So for me, I took that as, I really need to kind of just like start over and just comb through and make sure that I really understand the JavaScript language. So there's a book called Eloquent, it's called Eloquent JavaScript. And it's not for beginners, but when you feel like you have a good handle on the language, I would definitely go through that book. I did finish I got my job before I finished it, but I did feel like it really helped me understand some of the core concepts of JavaScript and helped me build projects without using any frameworks. I also used several courses on Udemy. There was one that was specifically, I can't remember who it was by, but it's like the only one where it's like build 20 plain vanilla JavaScript projects. And I also did that as well because from networking, I learned that a lot of companies were asking for you to build like maybe a little small widget or component or something like that.
Oh, nice. And oh, heck, we've dropped her. She'll be right back. Everything's chill. We're going to have a question about networking next. So also by Adrian, who's just asking fantastic questions. But Caroline or Annie, did you all find any resources about job hunts or any tactics that were sort of especially useful for you post bootcamp?
When you say sources, is it sources to get the job or sources for like the interviews and like the kind of resources that Taylor was talking about? I'm not quite sure if I understand the question.
I think the question might be more specifically asking, like, oh, hey, where did you look to find these job openings? But because I'm rubbish, I've sort of opened it up a bit more to say, oh, or what kinds of resources for looking for jobs were the most useful for you?
One of the tips that I got from Bootcamp was that when you're looking for jobs is to like don't just send your resumes and everything like out into the ether because it just kind of disappears and you never hear back. It's really, really helpful to find someone at the company and then send it to them directly to make sure that you actually have eyes on your resume. So that was like a really good technique that we learned early on.
Yeah. Can we slow down a little bit? Because I want to unpick this just a bit because for folks who haven't, because we've got a networking question coming up. For folks who haven't done this before, you'd be like, oh, I'll just find somebody and send them my resume. That's going to freak them out a little bit, right? What might that look like in the real world to say, oh, I want to get, I want to interview, I'm interested in this job at Bubble Corp. What might that look like to sort of step through the steps of, oh, I'm gonna find someone. How would you find somebody on the internet? And this sort of comes to the networking online question as well, I think.
So if I were to go through that process, what I would do is, first of all, I'll look for like the company that I would like to work for, and then look on LinkedIn to see like potentially is there another like developer who's working there that I can reach out and ask them some questions and everything. Pre-pandemic times in Toronto, I would have like approached that person directly and say, hey, can I buy you a coffee and just like chat to you about things? And that was something that I actually did even before I got my job. I did a lot of that kind of stuff just to find out more about the industry and at large in like my area, which is in Toronto, and to find out what kind of issues like companies were having and how like what kind of things they valued when they were looking for somebody. So I did a lot of that, like actually like networking and like reaching out to people directly just to put like a human face to the company.
So sort of making gentle internet friends.
Yes.
And one thing I really want to push is, and this for folks who haven't worked in tech yet, this sounds baffling. This sounds complete, but often if you recommend somebody for a job and they get the job, you get a bonus. So if you're asking someone, oh, hi, let's have a chat. Oh, what's your work like? Oh, what? And then you say, oh, hey, coming out of this chat, I'm really excited. I'm going to go ahead and apply. You can say, should I just send that in? Or you've been so helpful. Is it okay to mention your name? Is it useful? And oftentimes they'll say, yeah, I'll recommend you. So I get the bonus. Caroline, did you have any resources for job hunting that you found were especially useful, or any sort of tips or tricks that made your life a lot easier?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So if I was looking for job listings, and I don't know how well this applies for junior jobs because I haven't done it for a while, but I'd look on like LinkedIn or Stack Overflow. But the way I got the job that I have was literally I just tweeted, "Hey, I'm looking for a job as a developer. does anyone work somewhere where they're hiring junior developers or know someone who does? And a friend of mine was like, oh yeah, this person, and that's how I ended up getting this job, which it all sounds kind of, very serendipitous, but I guess it's just so important that like you have a network. You might not think that you're like someone who networks, but if you know people at all, you have a network. So use it as much as you can. It's and like try to expand it as well. But if you feel like, oh, I don't have a network, like you 100% do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it can grow every day.
Mm-hmm. And just something I'd like to add on to that as well. I wasn't active on Twitter until like last year at all. So I wasn't using Twitter at all for like the job hunt or anything. But what I would say is a lot of first devs like get freelancing gigs. And the way to do that, just to build up their portfolios and stuff, is literally to let your friends and family know, hey, I just did this amazing thing. I just graduated from bootcamp. Do you need me to help you build something and like that kind of stuff? So that is how it's just like, if you don't let anybody know that you've done this and you don't put yourself out there, no one's going to find out about you. So yeah, like literally just let your friends and family know, and you'd be surprised. As a designer, I got a lot of jobs and it was just word of mouth. So yeah.
And one thing I really want to push is if you are doing little jobs, and even if you're doing free work for friends or family, that goes on your resume or that goes on your CV.
Yes.
Free work is still work. And when you get asked about it, you don't have to say, "Oh yeah, that's my sister. She didn't pay me." Don't say that. You say, "Oh yeah, like let's take a look at that website. So this is a jewelry design website, and I approached it from this." And you don't need to say like, "Oh, that's my sister. She's a nerd." Like, nah. So this might be a little bit of an exploratory question. So we've got somebody saying, "Hey, of course the internet is global, but can you all think of any country-specific job issues that people might face while looking for a job?"
Yeah, I
and
can speak. Oh, sorry.
please. I was gonna say being from the States, and I bet we were about to say the exact same thing. So I'll let you say it.
Yeah, I was going to say I could speak specifically to the United States. So there were a few people in my boot camp who were international, so the visa process is something that they struggled with. That I feel like is the biggest challenge. Right now, I mean, there are a lot of companies that are hiring and are willing to sponsor. I had someone on my team maybe a couple months after I got hired. He was from Canada, and they sponsored him and brought him and his wife over. So it is possible. I think it's very, very hard because especially when you're applying to, well, with smaller companies, they don't always have the funding to be able to sponsor your visa. I'm not sure how much the price is, but I know it's very, very expensive. And then on top of that, when you are applying to some larger companies and there's that little checkbox that says, whether or not you are a citizen or whether or not you're going to need sponsorship, if that company is using any kind of technology that just automatically scans applications, they might have something in there that just immediately puts you into a different pool if you're someone that requires sponsorship. So that's definitely, I think that's probably the biggest challenge. Like what Annie said, reaching out to specific people, I think is something that can help, because if someone's willing to share with you like what the process is, if they do have any insight into what it looks like for someone who's an international candidate, they can kind of help you, or they can tell you, just quite honestly, maybe this is not the company at this time, and help you, not waste your time on a company that's not going to sponsor you.
And one thing I'd add is I often see that it feels reasonably unusual to me. Maybe that's gotten more common in sort of these modern times, but back before the world got weird, I thought it was reasonably unusual for folks just coming out of a boot camp to see sponsorship. So usually I'd see somebody who had a couple of years in industry get relocated.
Yes.
I was actually going to say, for the States, one of the things I find I hear is really challenging for folks looking to make that switch is trying to find a role with appropriate health insurance as well, which is always nice and scary.
Yeah, I think that's also a challenge if you're coming from another country, because you might not know what to ask or how to ask. I mean, even like I'm a citizen and I don't even know, what my healthcare or my vacation policy is really going to be until they've given me that offer. So it can definitely put you in a precarious situation when you want that sponsorship and then you receive the offer and then they tell you that you only have 10 days of vacation a year. So, I mean, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind, that is a risk. And it's kind of hard when you're in the interview process to navigate those kinds of questions just because of culture. It's still a little like iffy if too early in the interview process if you start asking about benefits.
Oh gosh, I could never do a junior interview these days. I would get kicked immediately out where I'd be like, I'm sorry, did you just say 10 days? Mm, mm. Sorry, all of the Europeans are just like, absolutely not. Signing in from your experience in Japan and experience in Canada and experience in the UK. Can we think of any? When I talk to boot campers, sometimes when I talk to boot campers who are in global contexts, so I talk to a lot of folks who are really skilled, especially in. I talk to a lot of Nigerians who are fantastic, who find that they've got a really difficult time getting that first job, especially in international roles. But I fear I'm not the best place to say, oh, other people told me, and I'll tell you their business. Nah. But talking to other folks that have graduated in global contexts to say, oh, you know what, it is a lot harder if you're not in the States or not in Canada or not in Western Europe to get those first jobs, especially if they are with international companies, can be really challenging for folks. Anything specific to Canada or the UK though?
I haven't found anything specific to Canada, but I will say my first job, it was 10 days of vacation. And apparently that was like a thing in Canada. You get a minimum of 10 days. So I got a minimum of 10 days. But I would say, but we have universal healthcare. So that was never really anything to be worried about. But one of the things that I have heard just from speaking to other like developers like online and stuff is that in some countries, they place a lot higher value in having a CS degree. So it really depends on where you're from. I think maybe India might be one of them. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me. But sometimes in other countries, like not having specific like accreditations or a degree, in countries where they value that a lot more is like could be like hinder us. But for Canada specifically, I've never had any issues, and I would say the same for Australia as well.
Oh gosh, I completely forgot that you've got Australia under. Sorry, you're covering 90% of the world for us.
Yeah, I don't have lots to add here because I'm mostly just a very entitled European. But one of the reasons I was living in the States, I have dual citizenship, and one of the reasons I did the boot camp in the UK was I came back, so I didn't have to pay for health insurance because I couldn't have done it as a student. I think I don't have much context for this, but I think one thing about when you're saying about asking about benefits in the interview process or asking about visa sponsorship is that it might feel really daunting when you're on the start of this journey and trying to get your first step into a job. But like companies are dying to hire developers at every level. It's like it is so in demand. And so as long as you're polite and pleasant, don't worry too much about saying up front, like, oh, I'm just wondering if you do visa sponsorship. Like politely asking the question is always the way, so that you kind of don't waste your time or anyone else's. Because imagine you think you don't want to apply for a job and then find out after a while they can't sponsor you. Imagine if a company is prepared to hire you and really, really likes you, and then they find out that you need to be sponsored and they can't do it. Like it's just, finding out stuff up front. I would strongly recommend it.
We've got a question. Do you know what? I've been excited. And I'm so sorry. It's not terribly likely that we'll get to everybody's questions, but we'll go ahead and throw some of these up in the forum as well. And I'll chase folks to answer these. We've got a really good one saying, all right, so you've gone through the boot camp and you finished it and you're in your first jobs. And of course, all of you are absolutely killing it. You're just absolutely amazing. What kind of habits have made the greatest impact or have made good impacts on your front end skills? I love a teacher question. This is such a teacher question.
I would say for me, I think just being realistic about what I could do within a given time frame. Like I said, I had a full-time job, so I could not. I had to think, should I be focusing my learning on maybe small front end projects to build up little skills? Whereas I may not have the time to build out a full app and put it on the app store or make a whole website. If I'm building a portfolio, I mean, I never ended up doing it, but when I was planning on making a portfolio, there was, should I build the entire thing from scratch, or should I at least pull maybe a pre-built landing page and then everything else I can build myself? So kind of like thinking about little things that would help me ultimately reach my end goal sooner, because I couldn't keep up with what everyone else was doing. And again, like you said too, making sure to rest, making sure, because I got to one point where my networking, I was scheduling network meetings like 5 times a week. And this was on top of my full-time job, or even, multiple times a day. And it got really, really overwhelming. So making sure that I'm not doing too much when I realistically don't have the time and energy to do so.
And like, I was about to say, oh, I love that. But no, I don't. I don't love that was your experience. But I love that sort of insight to say, hey, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't just keep doing. Is so rare to find in. It's so rare to find just in general for somebody to have the. Everybody's terrible at self-assessment, and you just had the good common sense and the really excessively good self-assessment to say, oh wow, this is too much. I need to slow down and take this in a way that feels manageable.
Yeah,
Annie,
I think
please.
sorry.
No, sorry.
I wasn't looking. I was just going to say, I think similar to that is that people do this with everything, with like exercise and hobbies and stuff. You go, oh yeah, I'm gonna code every day. I'm gonna do 2 hours of studying every day. I'm gonna do it, and then you don't, and then you get angry with yourself, and you can't do good stuff. You make positive change in your life when you feel good about yourself, not when you feel angry with yourself. And so setting realistic things for learning, like this week I'm gonna complete, I'm gonna watch this video and make the exercise that went with it, and then I'll know more about building a React component. Like this month I'll get these few things done. But yeah, just consistency is so important, but like realistic consistency as well. So go, no, every day I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna do it, and then when you don't on the 4th day, getting mad at yourself. Like so yeah, very similar to what Taylor said, essentially.
Really sort of giving yourself the flexibility to learn in restful, gentle way. I like, and it sounds like self-forgiveness is wrapped up in there. So, oh, hey, I missed this. It's not the end of the world. And when you said, oh, people talk about exercise the same way. And when I say I see that, you like how I'm pretending that's other people. Be like, oh, yes, those other people go to the gym once and they're like, oh, I'm doing this every day. This is who I am now. And that's really make or break, where you say, yeah, some days you're going to be on the couch. It's okay. You need to build those couch days in.
Yeah, because if you're in a mindset where if you have a couch day or a day where you feel that you can't learn, and that's going to really make you mad and think, oh, I can't do this at all, then you're not giving yourself a chance. That you are setting yourself up to not achieve your goals if you're not being fair on yourself, essentially.
Yeah.
For me, I would say there's like 2 kind of things that have really kind of made a great impact on like my learnings and stuff. And the first one is figuring out how you learn. And the second one is the ability to do deep work and concentrate. So the first one is like in figuring out how you learn. Some people like love reading documentation. Other people have to do like tutorials and hear something. For me, if I hear someone say something, it sticks with me a lot easier. And of course, to actually like do the thing is like how you learn as well. But document, like just reading, sometimes if I'm just reading a lot of things, I find that's not the best way for me personally to learn. Although I love reading as well. But so yeah, figuring out how you learn is a really important one, and like kind of optimizing that. And then the second one is the ability to do deep work and to get yourself into a place where you don't have the distractions of social media, of like all these like network communication tools. There was this study once, and what they found is that the more distracted you are, the more you lose the ability to concentrate and focus on things, and it can become quite permanent. So building the ability to like really, really get deep into what you're studying and learning for like longer periods of time, and of course like take breaks and stuff. My like massage therapist actually said I'm supposed to like stand up every 10-15 minutes because you just get stuck in just sitting. But you like having that focus where you're not like, oh, getting distracted by something else and then losing time, like with the context switching and trying to get back into what you were doing before, has a really big impact on the ability to learn. And I think for me, that was what was really good about bootcamp, because I was so focused on one thing only, and the one thing was just to get through bootcamp and learn everything that I could learn and had to learn. So it was just a period of very, very focused work, and I wasn't on social media or anything back then, so it was it really skyrocketed like what I was able to learn in a shorter amount of time.
And it breaks my heart because what you're saying is absolutely stuff. When we had experts come and join us for a guest session for week 1, they said the exact same thing.
Oh.
So like they were like, I can link you to. They sorry, I'm just like promoting my own stuff. It was all them. None of the smart stuff was me. But they were like, oh yeah, well, get rid of your distractions. Go put your phone away. Make sure there's no social media logged in. And I wanted, like, on a deep and spiritual level to reject that. But now there's 3 very, very smart people telling me that. And all right, y'all, I think they might be right. Giuseppe's asking a really, really good question here and saying, okay, cool. You all talked about career support being really valuable. What other factors made you choose the specific boot camp that you chose?
I chose mine partly because I knew I was going to have to go back to the UK to be able to afford to do it, and I'd lived in London for a long time and I didn't want to go back there, and it was very expensive. So I literally looked up like what places do I like and do they have boot camps, and then I happened upon the one that I ended up going to, but they had, like I said, they had a lot of support from the Scottish government. It was like part of this initiative, and so it was really about. It wasn't just the organisation. Like the local area really wanted this boot camp to succeed because they needed people to be able to do these jobs, and that kind of really spoke to me. Like it's not just they're going to take my money and see how it goes. It's benefiting other people. And also, you had the option of doing a externally accredited qualification, which is really, really rare. In the end, about half my class didn't. Essentially, the people who got jobs quite quickly did not complete it, and the people who had a bit more time afterwards did. But so that was really appealing. And I think because it really focused on like full stack development, and we learned about databases and yeah, the full stack aspect appealed to me because that was what I wanted to know more about.
That's interesting about the full stack one, because for me, coming from a design background, I was not ready to jump into full stack. But the one thing that really was a driving motivator for me to choose the bootcamp I went with was the community and alumni network. Before I actually joined the bootcamp, because there were several bootcamps in the Toronto area, I actually reached out to various alumni to ask them about their experiences. Because you can read stuff on the internet and they're like, oh, this is the best bootcamp, but you don't actually really know until you actually speak to the people. And when I spoke to people, they were like, they loved the bootcamp, and they were just like, this was the best thing I've ever done in my life. No regrets, you should do it. And that spoke volumes to me as like the kind of community that this bootcamp had built up around itself. They had, like all these, and if I look at the careers of the alumni who have gone through that bootcamp and where they are now, I can also see that the career progression that they've made. So that was the alumni, the community was very strong, and I could see like the progressions of past alumni as well. So that was like very important to me.
So Taylor, aside from career support, were there any factors that made you choose your very fancy, kind of expensive boot camp? I'm just salty about never having gotten to spend that much money on literally anything.
Oh no, I'm still paying off the loan, so so for me, I checked out 3 different boot camps in the New York City area, and so I really liked the one that I chose was the community and the support, and also I made sure to ask like what would happen if I was struggling or if I wasn't keeping up with the class. There were some boot camps that would have weekly checkpoints, and if you were not doing well, you were out of the boot camp because it would ultimately mess up their number, their like graduation rates or something like that. So there was more boot camps that were more focused on their output. So there wasn't a lot of support if you were struggling. There was some boot camps where I remember clearly going to one, and there when I had asked some questions, it was like everyone on the panel would kind of look at each other and not want to answer when this was talking about their own experience. So that was kind of like a red flag to me. And then the boot camp that I ultimately decided going to, they had a great support system. They had like a pre-boot camp course that you could go through. It really seemed like it was very important to them. Like community was as important as the coursework that they had given you.
So we've got another question I really love here to say, hey, have you all, either in the tutorial or in your individual learning, ever gotten trapped in tutorial heck? And for those, for maybe some of you or who've never experienced that or never experienced this term, that's when you're learning in a tutorial environment and you just kind of get stuck. I like to call it tutorial purgatory. And you can't like break past the tutorial environment to go and actually do the thing. Were you all, did you all ever wind up there?
Yeah, it's sort of one of the reasons that I end up going to a boot camp because of how many times it happens. And it's like it still happens now when you're trying to learn something new. Yeah, sorry for the bad news, but this stuff is really hard.
You can always wind up trapped.
Yeah, it's like this stuff is really hard. If it wasn't, everyone would do it. And I think accepting that that's a part of life is that you are going to get really stuck sometimes. But having strategies to get out of there, asking for help with people who you trust or who will have time to help you. Literally just standing up and walking around the block. That's an amazing one. Literally stepping away from the computer. It feels so counterintuitive. You're like, no, I must keep focusing and working harder and then I'll get to it. But just look at something else for 15 minutes. And
So
your brain works differently when you're not hyper-focused. And you can, sometimes the things will just sift through.
So recognizing that focused mode of thinking isn't working and stepping away and getting that sort of diffuse mode going for a little while and seeing if that chills you out.
Yeah, and I thought I knew how to sit for a bit and then be like, oh yeah, I'll just keep sitting in this chair, but I'll read Twitter, I'll watch a video. It's like actually getting into a different space. You have to do that to switch your brain over.
Yeah, I found for me giving myself time limits because I get very overwhelmed with too much information. So I would start a tutorial, and if there's something at that moment that I didn't understand, I would end up Googling that term, and then that would end up leading me to Google this, and then that, and then another tutorial, and then I would have, like 50,000 tabs open, which I still currently do have right now. But what I would do is just like, okay, if I found myself hopping around too much, I would stop, and then I just added it as a bookmark. So like, okay, if I finish this, then I'll tackle that later. But if I find myself hopping around, if it's been an hour and I feel like if I look back and I say like, what have you learned in this hour? And it's like I've only opened up 50 tabs in the hour, and go back to where I originally started and just keep going through that.
You are a much more responsible person than I will ever be. Where you describe the, oh yeah, sometimes I'll just find myself going in circles and opening tabs. I'm like, yeah. So you're like, so I put a time limit and I was like, no.
I also doing that. Like that was, I spent I would say like a good half of the job hunt and trying to teach myself like doing that exactly. And it was a lot of outside influences of people telling me, you know, you need to stop and time yourself. So I say this not as someone who has practiced this very heavily.
I love how my approach is like, yes, yes, continue to drink deeply of the void. And you're like, no, let's like, we only get an hour of the void.
That's good.
Annie, have you ever wound up in tutorial heck and like
Yeah,
any tips or
for sure.
any sort of general takes on the void?
Yeah, I have to say, I probably have about 200 tabs open right now. And when I do like bookmarks, I admit that I never end up going to the bookmarks ever again. So it's just like this like black hole, like, you know, death for them. But I'm trying, maybe. In regards to like the tutorial hill, I think something that has been very beneficial with like my background as a designer specifically is that I'm very, very used to building projects from scratch, like coming up with an idea and then just executing on it and figuring out how to do it on the like as I go along. Again, like, you know, to Caroline's point, like that's why she went to bootcamp, because they force you to actually make up your own project and then just do it. So I'm kind of in that habit of just like making things and then figuring things out along the way. But at the same time, I know recently, because I'm learning a lot more like various things with like the back end and like authentication and stuff, and I have to go through tutorials to learn those things. I definitely find and understand about the tutorial help, because you can just go on and on and on about it, and on like with all the different ones. The way that I like really try to do it is that instead of going through every single step and just copying what the tutorial says or what the instructor says, I kind of like just like leave it and say, okay, how would I do this by myself? And then I force myself to do that, like to like build the next step by myself, or to like say, okay, I'm at this point, can I finish it myself? Or so like to make that project yours, so that you're forcing your brain to actually think through the steps and figure out how you do it yourself. And then if you get stuck, you can like go back to like the YouTube video or like tutorial and then figure out, oh, okay, did I do this differently? Did I do this another way? Is it right? Is it wrong? But going through the process of actually figuring out how to do that thing that you're trying to learn yourself, I find is very valuable. And that is like the number one tip that I have for breaking out, just because sometimes you just have to learn the thing. And it's so easy to just follow along and be like, oh, I am the greatest developer. This makes all sense. Like this makes so much sense. But as soon as you close that, you have no idea how you do it. And I've definitely found that.
So we've got a really good question saying like, hey, do you have any advice on finding a mentor or finding a study partner, somebody to give feedback about around passion projects? And then they're saying, and so rightly, they're so like, oh gosh, it feels really intimidating to send somebody a message on LinkedIn that you bet. And this feels like sort of a little bit of a callback to when we were talking about networking, because it feels like it's in the same neighborhood. But how do you chat to somebody online? How do you maybe find a study buddy or a mentor when the world is so big and humans are so scary?
So this isn't what I was thinking about when I was like preparing for today. There are like it is really scary, but there are lots of communities that exist a bit like this one that like specifically for that purpose. So I volunteer sometimes at something, well, it was an in-person event called Code Bar, which is for people who in person who want to learn to code, and they go, and there are developers who will help. And it's all tutorials, but a developer or a volunteer will sit with you, and when you get stuck, we'll answer your questions or try and explain stuff to you. And it's wonderful. I've been there as a developer and a student, and they have it all around the world. It's awesome. But they also have a Slack community that anyone can join, and there's lots and lots of things like this on there where, yeah, people saying, oh, I'm stuck on this tutorial, or oh, could someone look at my resume, or I've made this thing, do you think it will work? And this is just the one that I know about, but I googled a few, like this exists in other communities. It's not just Code Bar, and there are places where loads of people like us who are like, oh yeah, I'd love to help someone out to take the next step to help find a job, to improve their project. So I have some links that I can share afterwards for people.
So that sounds really really good advice. Go to where the friendly people are.
Yeah.
I would say for me, +1 to the communities from a peer-to-peer level, using the people who are in your boot camp, attending a lot of sessions like this too, because I don't know for this one if you can see like the list of people, but everyone here is in the same boat as you. So even just like those are the less scary people to reach out randomly, because those are other people that can like just give you another set of eyes on what you're working on. In terms of like if you're looking for someone that maybe is actively working as an engineer, establishing a relationship with them that doesn't start off just purely transactional, maybe just like starting off a conversation just about like, you know, what they're doing, how they got there, et cetera, and kind of segue into, you know, just asking, you know, do you currently have bandwidth to possibly take a look at like this current project that I'm working on? Like establishing a relationship first and then asking if they can give some feedback. If they don't have the bandwidth currently, ask them if there's anyone within their team or their organization who could help, and more than likely they're more than happy to connect you.
Yeah, definitely +1 on the communities online. There's one that I'm a part of called Virtual Coffee, and it's run by Becca, who's this amazing woman who's like got a lot of people together. And it's also a Slack, and they do like coffee chats as well, which is really nice. But also, if I'm thinking about the idea of a mentor, for me personally, like a mentor is kind of someone who is a bit more like down the path than you are currently, so that you can like ask them questions and get some guidance on not just like project feedback, but maybe on decisions that you're trying to make. So all my kind of personal mentors are like friends or people I know. Like they probably don't even know that they're my mentors, to be honest, because we think of mentorship as such like a formal term, but it's really someone that you can look through and you feel comfortable asking like someone for their advice and then taking their advice and guidance as well. Sometimes I'll get, you know, like emails and stuff, and people will be like, can you be my mentor? But I don't know them at all. I don't know the situation that they're in. Is like literally just, can you be my mentor? And you know, to that point, like what Taya said, there's like no pre-existing relationship at all. So you don't know where they're coming from. And it's like very, very difficult, especially when they're asking job hunting questions sometimes, because some of those questions can be very, very country specific to the type of work that companies are looking for and the kind of visa issues and everything as well. So yeah, like look around the people around you, and if there are someone like you know who's just like a little bit ahead of you, like consider them a mentor as well, because there's a lot of valuable guidance just in that as well.
And those are some really good. Oh, sorry, please.
I just want to add one thing that, yeah, saying to someone, will you be my mentor, is a bit, it's unusual, and like it does happen, and great relationships start that way. But yeah, my mentor probably doesn't know who's my mentor, but he definitely is. But do not underestimate the power of saying to someone like, oh, you really seem to know what you're talking about in this space. I'd love your opinion on this thing. Like, if someone said that to me, I'm like, oh, you think you know what I'm talking about and you want to hear what I have to say? Yes, please. How long have you got? Like, it can seem daunting, but people love talking about their stuff. Like, it's remember that.
Just be nice.
And I would even add to that too, you know, being nice and being personable. Like I've had people that reach out to me and they're saying like, oh, your background, et cetera, like, can you give me your 2 cents? And like, I'll take the time out to meet and speak with them. And then I never hear them from again, not even like a thank you or anything like that. And then, or you'll get people that reach out and they're immediately shooting you questions, you know, approaching people like they're people. And also, you know, just being kind and understanding that, you know, they're taking time out to speak with you and give you help and advice. So, you know, not just coming to someone, and +1 to what they both said is that my mentors don't necessarily know that they are my mentors. I've established a relationship with them first, so that it's not just this purely transactional thing of me just like taking information and advice from them.
That all sounds really, really solid. Now we've got a very specific, very opinionated question. Are we ready to fight? Are we ready to fight? aside from JavaScript, we'll take JavaScript as a given. Okay, and I bet this is somebody off my boot camp because this is me being mean, where I'm like, okay, we should probably learn JavaScript next. But aside from JavaScript, assuming that you've got a very, very mean teacher who's going to make you learn JavaScript next, what other languages might you recommend somebody looking into, or maybe looking into learning for somebody starting out? And they're saying here, there's just so many, it's too much. Are there any that you all are finding a lot of in job roles, or any that sort of give you some really transferable skills?
I say just knowing a language in general is the transferable skill. I don't think I'm starting to look into like my second job now, and my language has not been a hindrance at all. I've applied for jobs with different languages that I've never even looked at, but you know, when you're applying to jobs, they understand that not everyone is going to know everything, and they don't always automatically assume. A lot of companies I've seen now are really wanting people who can work in different spaces and not kind of just be stuck in one thing, but having the ability, and I think coming from a boot camp really shows that. It's like having the ability to like learn, to want to learn, and be able to, you know, okay, yeah, I know JavaScript now, but if you put me in a role where I'm working with Ruby, you know that I can be able to kind of pick up and learn as I go. My job, I also work in Java, but I barely learned how to use Java. I know enough Java to like get the job done. But I would just focus on like what you know best, finding a job within that. If there's a language that you're interested in learning, maybe finding jobs where like, okay, I know JavaScript, but this is also part of their stack, and communicating that when you speak to the recruiter.
That's a terrible answer. That's so mature. There's no fighting to be had in that answer. One of you two better give, like, come on, we need a little bit of fight. We don't need a bit of fighting. What do you think? Like, are there programming languages you think folks should really learn, or is this sort of learning how to learn the overarching vibe of the evening and perhaps our careers?
So, programming languages are like speaking languages. They all usually refer to the same stuff. So whether I'm, speaking French or English or German, there's a table, there's a cat, and there's different words for them. Maybe express it slightly differently. But learning to program is about learning those concepts. So let's say classes and objects, conditionals, loops. I'm trying to think of programming concepts in my head down. I can't think of any more. That's great. But it's understanding those things, not necessarily how to express them. That's the important thing. The language, like Taylor said, the language is details that you can pick up along the way. If you're really concerned with like choosing a language to make yourself employable, you could look at like the Stack Overflow survey they release every year, which shows which languages are kind of being most used by employers, which are the fastest growing ones. But like honestly, just pick one you like the look of and keep learning. If I did have to recommend one, probably Python. It's quite nice to learn and it's used all over the place, but that's just.
I love how you were just like open and then you're like, but also Python. I also, so as a linguist, I am really excited and a little bit low-key confused that you just sort of gracefully described a universal grammar for programming languages where you're like, oh yeah, at the end of the day, we've got a couple of different paradigms, we've got a couple different approaches, but you can learn the underlying concepts. I was like, all right, cool. Chomsky is somewhere feeling like somebody's sneaking up on him right now, and he does not know why.
Oh boy.
Annie, what do you think?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to add really quickly to your point about learning a language. I read somewhere like the language that you currently speak, if you think about like your everyday conversations, you're using a lot of the same words. Like you never use the 100% entirety of the language, even if that's your native tongue. So you probably use 30% of a language. So you only really need to know a couple concepts just to get by. So in a job, you're not going to be expected to understand 100% of the language, just those key things to get the project done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, I kind of echo everybody else about like learning. I feel like it's more important to learn and have a good understanding of learning one language deeply and knowing all the nuances of programming in general, which are then transferable to other languages. But to Caroline's point about like what is employable, I know because I worked at a WordPress VIP agency. PHP is not dead.
Oh, gosh, there's so many PHP jobs.
Yeah, and
And
there's
like,
so much freelance WordPress like jobs as well. Like that is a massive market. It's still about 30% of the web. And I know it's like really unsexy and everything, but it's out there. So
but like the WordPress community are just
there's so
absolute
much.
kittens as
They're
well.
lovely.
Oh, yeah. I love how everybody was very, very political, where they're like, oh, it's about the concept. And then at the end, you're like, yeah, Python. Yeah, PHP.
PHP.
PHP. I don't know why
Yeah.
you hear people sort of hoof about PHP, because like,
And jQuery.
yeah, there's still so much jQuery out there. When I was about to show my age, with these kids today being like, oh, I've got to learn React. I'm like, no, just fine. We'll just give it 10 more years and see if it sticks.
If you do learn PHP and you go down like the WordPress kind of track, they do like these amazing word camps. They're so amazing and you learn so much. Actually, going back to the like the mentorship question, I met one of the speakers on stage. I was so impressed by his presentation. I kind of reached out afterwards and said, hey, thank you so much. I got, like blah, blah, blah. You're in Toronto. Can I, take you out for a coffee or whatever? And then he ended up like actually say, hey, if you need any guidance, just reach out anytime. So you never know that they're very, very welcoming community.
And like for a tech conference, for them to be a tenor instead of 795
it's
local
amazing.
currencies is really so we've got Adrian is just out here with like these very deeply personal questions that are very good. And Adrian's like, hey, how do you feel about the industry now that you've been in it for a little while? Do you have sort of different thoughts from when you were first looking to get into tech and now?
That's a good question.
Right? Adrian, you know what? If we come back and do these panel stuff again, I might lovingly say like, Adrian, you're in charge. You're gonna drive.
I was worried that if I got a job as a developer, it would just be me, an idiot, surrounded by a load of really smart people. But it's me, an idiot, surrounded by a load of other idiots who are idiots in different ways. Or when I say idiots, perhaps I mean human beings. Like and even people who have got computer science degrees and all that stuff, everyone's winging it. Like there's too much stuff to learn. You have to look things up all the time. The smartest people I work with, the people who ship the best, most interesting stuff, they're always Googling things. No one knows no one knows what they're doing, because the idea of like really knowing what you're doing it's not real. Like it's not this kind of magical fortress full of geniuses. It's just a job. It's just a job like everything else. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. I'm so glad I get to do it. But yeah,
I think
everyone's
that's such
human.
a good point. Yeah, because for me, the more senior I get, I walk into these rooms and I'm very lucky. They let me sneak in places I shouldn't be. And I'll be like, oh, here's a conference. This speaker works at Google. Of course. And I'm like, oh, okay. Huh. And I keep getting to places where I'm like, surely this is fancy enough where everyone here will be brilliant and everyone here will be a grown-up. And it's a bit like, I suppose it's a bit like cop dramas where you just like, okay, everybody's fallible and everybody makes confusing mistakes. There's no level of fanciness that you can get to where people just know what they're doing and act appropriately all the time. That's not reassuring. Annie or Taylor, do you have any more or less reassuring? What was then? What's now?
I kind of agree with Caroline about just, it became a lot more realistic how much everyone didn't know once I started working in the industry. I think also realizing kind of, I think for lack of better words, like how powerful you are with these skills. Because in my previous role, I worked in fashion and I was very stuck. If I wanted a new job, jobs were very far and few in between. And in this job, there's a couple things that, aren't really working for me. And it's almost expected, and to a degree, and also at the same time, not as challenging as it was for me previously to find another company that has what I'm looking for. It's very weird being on the other, the side of the job hunt where people are kind of trying to convince you to join their team and convince you to join their companies. And I'm like, that's not how I ever knew that this was supposed to work. So understanding that there's a lot of flexibility in this industry, there's things that I've been scared to ask for, and then I ask for it, and then they want to give it to you because they don't want you to leave. So, I mean, I don't mean to say this in the way that everyone should walk around with this level of arrogance, because I've met a lot of amazing people, and there is some great communities out there. But at the same time, you know, it's kind of a nice feeling to feel like in demand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything Caroline and Taya said. Like the feeling of, you know, before I started, you put people who have been doing it for ages like on a pedestal, because like programming is so hard, and it's like they have this like magic, you know, like skill that they have. But then you get there and everyone's like, yeah, you know, I'm just like trying stuff, I'm just experimenting. And even in my work right now at a startup, like we're literally just like reading documentation and Googling and just trying things. And like the internet is really just made out of people who are just going for it, which is like really interesting. And the thing that any differences from what I thought, I guess something that kind of struck me was I remember going to my first conference, and it's funny because like I ended up like I was like volunteering for that conference, and then I talked to like one of the people who was giving a speech later on that day. And I Googled him later, and I realized that he is this big Google celebrity, but he was just so down to earth and approachable. And I find that about the industry as well. As much as there's negatives and positives, there are so many people out there who's just like so willing to, you know, give you their time, and they're just normal people at the end of the day, whatever their social media may seem like. And they look like they're this like celebrity, but they are just like normal people. And it's just normal people at the end of the day doing their work, trying to make the industry a better place. And like, yeah, it's nice. I like it.
Yeah. I'm going to be
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, there's one more thing I meant to say. Before I was a developer, when I kind of wanted to become one, all these things that people would say, like, oh, go to meetups in particular, do tech things, and you can learn stuff. But going to meetups was the big one. I think, oh, I don't belong there. Everyone will be like, oh no, this person's just some learner. Like, what on earth? Who do they think they are? If I now went to a meetup or met someone at work who came and said, oh, I'm learning to code, I'd be like, that's awesome. Like, go you. I'm so glad you're at this meetup. Can I help you? Like, you think you're kind of on the outside of something, but yeah, everyone is a lot friendlier than.
I didn't realize how much of like that community exists before I got into tech, because tech to me seems so like you're just typing in a dark room in a basement and you're just like doing your thing, but there's just like so much more. And that I would say was like one of the things that really surprised me.
Yeah, and I would even say, like, don't let what you see. I mean, Annie, I think you kind of touched upon it, like what sometimes people see on the internet. Like, I see a lot of gatekeeping, especially on Twitter, and a lot of people who say like this all first job, or like people won't even Y and Z. I don't. That's when you're actually talking to the individual developer. So even when you are like, you know, reaching out.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I think you might be breaking up just a little bit. We'll go ahead and give you a second to see if that comes back. Everything's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. We'll go ahead and get Taylor back in just a moment. This sounds exceptionally cruel and exceptionally unkind. But while Taylor's coming back to say hello to us again, I fear, and because I fear a lot, that we're going to have to head off in just one second. Because I am the meanest possible person. Hey, Taylor, welcome back.
Sorry, I have so many emails.
Everything's fine. What's the worst that could happen? It's just the internet. They're just computers. We're all going to have to vanish into different corners of our own internet in just a moment. Because I'm the person with the big button, I figured I might cheat and be especially unkind and pick the last question. If you, and this is not a hypothetical question, this one's real. If you were talking to folks who were on a boot camp now, or who were looking at doing this kind of learning, or looking at setting out on an equal sized learning journey, what kind of advice would you want to leave them with? Or what kind of like encouragement? Yeah. As we get ready to head into our afternoons or our evenings or our early mornings, what do you want folks to remember?
Good question.
Okay, I'll go because now says, I do this in meetings at work all the time. I can only tolerate silence for so long. Yeah, get loads of sleep. It's like, if you're finding it hard, that's okay. It is hard. Like, you are trying to do a hard thing. Be kind to yourself. Don't think that you're dumb because you're finding it difficult, because it is difficult. And probably the best thing, the hardest thing that I have to do when I was learning and on a daily basis, every time you learn a new thing, it uncovers 20 other things that you realize you also don't know. Just learn to live with that. Like, it's like the serenity prayer. Like, grant me the aptitude to learn the things that I do need to chill, to not worry about the things that I don't need to right now, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the big one. And yeah, find the nice people, because they're all out there. There's some of them on this call right now, and there are lots of people who want to like help and will be happy to give advice. And and yeah, find them because they are there.
I would say
my words of wisdom.
I'm sorry. I think just keep going. I feel like everyone says that, but I mean, even if it takes you longer than you think it takes other people, if you think that you're struggling more than someone else is struggling, I mean, everyone kind of learns at their own pace, but when you get the job or you get to where you want to be, you're not like, I feel like I barely remember some of the struggles that I had when I was in boot camp, or like, I remember I had one interview where I like cried afterwards and I don't even really remember why. So it's like all of those kinds of things you forget about because, you know, when you finally get to where it is that you want to be, all of those things kind of just like fade away. So just keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would add that like you definitely belong in tech, and I just want to like absolutely say that because it's so easy to feel like, oh, maybe, you know, I can't do this. It's so difficult. Maybe people don't look like me or whatever. And it's like very easy to get into that mindset, but you absolutely do belong. And also like, oh, I had the general tip and I completely forgot it.
Is it that it's okay to forget things?
I guess, I mean, that is true. It's okay to
modeling.
Google. It's okay to Google as well. But I think it was about, error messages are your friend. Like they are definitely your friend. Like learn to understand and read error messages and then just Google the error messages, because it's like, I know at the beginning when I started, error messages are so intimidating, but afterwards they get into like a bit of a pattern. So just like get comfortable with error messages and be comfortable being uncomfortable, because there's going to be a lot of that because the industry keeps changing so fast. Yeah, so you're always learning new things. So yeah, definitely get comfortable being uncomfortable. But you do belong, and you don't need to be good at maths as well.
Oh yeah, no, fair.
Yeah.
Cool. So get lots of rest, be comfortable feeling weird about stuff, that you do belong here, that stuff, even when it's not okay, is mostly going to be okay. And with that, I think we're going to all say goodbye. Taylor, Annie, Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much again for, just being very, very exciting, very, very lovely people to have in the industry. Until the next time I try and beleaguer you into coming on a stream, I'll let you all go. Thank you again.
Thank you.
I've never been on a stream or a panel before. This was so exciting. Thank you so much for having
We'll just invite you back for all of them. We'll be like, today's special guest is, and also Caroline's here.
me. So, Nick,
I'll
thank you
let
so
you
much,
go.
and it was wonderful to meet you.
Have a great day, evening.
Yeah, yeah.
Bye.
Bye.